The servo skull floated into the reclusium and bobbed patiently at eye level near the arched stone entrance. The massive portal was 4 meters high and 3 wide, the curves of the arch made up of voluminous angels' wings, with the tips coming together to form the peak. In full battle plate, Keldorn, guardian of the ritual, knelt in meditation at the far end of the hall before a lit candle. There were as many reclusiums in the Tears of Baal as there were guardians, each allowed to arrange the solemn spaces as they pleased. It was the same with the ritual. There was no set procedure, and each guardian was given the freedom to perform this most crucial function as he saw fit. Keldorn believed with all his being that the only way to truly serve the Emperor and bring back their Lord Sanguinius was to clear the mind, body, and spirit of all impurities. Hence, his reclusium was open to all, but contained nothing to distract the soul from its purpose. The winged doorway along with the candle were the only exceptions, and these only because they served to remind those in attendance where exactly they should focus: their venerable Primarch and the light of the God Emperor. His company was the third, known as the Proving Ground within the chapter. Its pride and battle record was matched only by the first. Keldorn thought the moniker apt, and that he was the best one to guide the souls of those seeking to join their essence to the Primarch, and through this, preserve the Imperium. To this end, he had chosen to place the candle on a slightly raised dais, suffering not even a basic altar to mar his vision of simplicity. The winged entrance reminded his charges of their mission, the candle the way to achieve it. The only other features were the rows of unadorned benches lining the hall, and of course, the grated iron drain in the center. As he rose, the slightest scrape and clink of ceramite on stone echoed in the chamber, which was large enough to house the entire company at once if need be. Usually there were at least a few battle brothers present, disciplining their minds and reconnecting with their sacred duties. The chamber was vacant now, and though the hovering skull had not caused the emptiness, it was surely its herald. His footfalls booming in the space, Keldorn strode towards the doorway and the waiting messenger. He paused at the iron grating, as he always did before a ritual. Removing his bleached white skull helm, he squatted down and placed it facing him in the center of the immaculately cleaned drain. The red eyes stared back at him with the pitilessness that only his kind could summon. As he stared into the visage that all his enemies saw, and, he remembered, most of his brothers, he came to the same realization that he always did. He hated this. The ritual was a barbaric necessity in a galaxy bereft of comfort and safety. If it wasn't for the utterly worthy goal of the Primarch's return and the achievement of a simulacrum of the Emperor's dream, he would just as soon end this practice. During the rare times when he met with other scions of the Ninth or the fabled former Legion itself, they never discussed the flaw. He wasn't even certain they all suffered from it. Were the Tears one of the few cursed, or were they the luckiest? He thought the former unlikely. He could see the haunted look in his cousin's eyes. The flaw and rage in them was obvious to another who bore it, especially one whose job it was to hold it at bay and put down those who fell. Some of his fellow guardians reveled in the ritual, looked forward to it, and performed the rites with the zeal of a warrior claiming a prize earned in blood. A few even went so far as to routinely question the soul wardens, Emperor save their blighted souls, as to the time of the next sacrifice. His hate burned cold, and during the ceremony, he knew his voice left a ragged edge where it cut the silence during the benedictions. His grip on the shoulders of both participants was not to symbolically bind them to their duties, as the whispers he heard circulating through the battle barge surmised, but to hold himself there and ensure his hand did not stray to the Crozius on his back before it was time. Brother killing brother was what brought on the Black Rage in the first place, and history was rife with tales of fighting fire with fire, darkness with darkness, and few ended well. He rose for a second time and replaced the helm on his head, the seals giving the softest hiss as the internal systems reset and interfaced with his mind. He dismissed all the scrolling runes and data feeds, preferring, as always, to face this task without distraction. Keldorn closed the remaining distance to the servitor, their skulls leering at each other in the dim light.
"Proceed,"
he heard himself say. The skull bobbed as if in acknowledgement and backed out of the chapel. Keldorn remained perfectly still as exactly 9 minutes passed. At the precise moment when the final minute expired, 3 figures, 2 in training robes and 1 in power armor, approached the archway. Keldorn knew the names of all 3. One was his constant companion in this endeavor, another a proven fighter worth having at your side, and the last one an adolescent who would never take to the field, but would serve mightily in his own way. They stopped in front of him. He addressed the robed battle brother near to succumbing to the flaw. As he began the ritual, his voice was flat and emotionless as his frowning helm.
Why do you disturb the peace of this place?
To continue to serve,
Came the response. He could see the rage dancing behind his battle brother's eyes, held in check only by his will to see this through. Containing something that had once felt a Primarch was a task few could manage for long. That was why the Guardians were given their title. They were not guarding the ritual itself or holding some secret knowledge. No, all Tears of Baal knew the steps, all knew the process. He was there, armed and armored, to ensure that what needed to be done was done, whether that was a continuation of service in their cause or a summary termination of the same. Again, Keldorn spoke to the battle brother.
What price will you pay?
the cost is borne by another.
As he said this, the Astartes warrior bowed and stepped to Keldorn's left.
Who would pay such a price?
When Keldorn finished the question, the young initiate, only recently implanted with gene seed, stepped forward.
I do. Why?
The question always cut Keldorn to his soul. He felt the entirety of history on his shoulders when he asked it. Why indeed?
So the angel may lead us again,
responded the boy, bowing his head and moving to Keldorn's right and opposite the battle brother who would soon end his life. Keldorn nodded his head once and turned to the final figure.
Will you collect the gene seed, ensuring the line of the angel continues?
The other armored warrior, keeper of the blood Cerned, stepped forward and said,
As the Emperor wills.
Keldorn nodded again and turned.
Follow me.
They proceeded under the giant winged archway and moved in silence to the iron grate, the newly implanted aspirant behind Keldorn, followed by the warrior near to the flaw, and finally, the keeper. Keldorn tread on the grate, the dull echo of ceramite on stone changing to the clang of metal on metal. It sounded like a bell tolling to him, a bell foretelling bloody sacrifice. The four of them formed a rough diamond around the circular grate, the two armored warriors forming the long points and the robed marines the shorter ones. Cerned stood impassively, his Narthesium gauntlet humming softly in tune with his power armor. Both the Astartes who would fall soon to the rage and the aspirant looked uneasy but determined. Keldorn knew this was the second time the warrior had undergone the ritual. The first was decades in the past. It never got easier. In fact, battle brothers requiring frequent application of the ritual almost welcomed admission into the death companies and the removal of the need to perform this grisly rite. None in the ranks of the proving ground could say how Keldorn felt. His skull helm hid all but his stern resolve to do his duty. He produced from a leather pouch at his belt 2 items, a golden cup and a small knife dyed red with the blood of its victims. The knife was as sharp as any combat blade. Keldorn knew this because one of his duties was to ensure its keenness at all times. He handed both to the warrior with the rage behind his eyes, placed one of his hands on the shoulder of each of the unarmored figures, and said,
Be swift.
The warrior immediately responded, looking at the aspirant.
You will join us once again in the guise of Sanguinius.
Then he struck, the knife blade moving with tremendous speed and slashing the offered throat of the aspirant. Keldorn drove the fingers of his gauntlets into both shoulders, holding them together. The arterial wound was perfectly placed, spraying blood over the cream-colored robes and the armor of the Astartes alike. Cern's gray cloak was splattered with dark red, but he made no move. The warrior needed only a single heartbeat from the aspirant for his blood to overflow the cup. He drank deeply from it and stepped back, Keldorn's hand guiding the younger warrior down to the ground and the older one back. Cern slipped forward and without a wasted motion delivered the Emperor's piece to the aspirant and harvested the gene seed. Then it was over. The entire episode had lasted less than 10 seconds. Keldorn braced himself. Now was the true test. Moving his hand from the shoulder of the warrior to his throat, Keldorn reached back and drew his Crozius, activated the power field, and prepared to strike. The warrior did not struggle. To do so now was certain death. The Guardian looked at him through the red lenses of the skull helm, every muscle tense and his mace purring with potential force. Keldorn stared into his eyes, searching. It was gone. The rage had receded. With care, he disabled the power field, returned the Crozius to his back, and released Brother Relev's throat, grateful that today he had presided over only one death.
You are cleansed, brother. Welcome back.
For Sanguinius, for the Emperor,
came the hoarse reply. An hour later, Keldorn knelt bareheaded before the candle again, dimly aware of the receding sound of the menial servitors. They always came in after a respectful time interval to clean the grated drain. It was a duty they had never performed, and one that Keldorn would never allow them to perform. After Cerned and Battle Brother Relev had departed with the aspirant's body, he had immediately scrubbed down the iron grate and removed any trace of blood spatter from his armor and the room. He needed to do this personally, as though if he did it himself it would somehow absolve him of a sin or wash away the distaste. It didn't work, but he still preferred it to the cold care of the lobotomized servitors. He stared into the flame and reflected on another ritual complete, another brother returned to the fold, another sent to the angel. It was a gruesome business, one that must be simultaneously held at arm's length and intimately embraced. There was no other way to preserve the chapter or the Imperium. He felt his hate kindle anew at their impossible condition. Keldorn replaced his skull helm. The swish of robes and footsteps were audible outside the Reclusium. The members of the Third Company had heard of Relev's successful ritual and knew they could attend to their souls in the chapel again. He must be ready to serve them as needed. He was glad for the helm now, for it hid his lingering scowl as his brothers entered. He would bear this burden, not gladly, but with honor. The angel must return to the Imperium, whatever the cost.